The day my son picked up my husband's old mahogany keepsake box and said, "Mom, this is just taking up space. I'll toss it." I didn't argue. I didn't stop him. I simply nodded and watched him carry it toward the garage trash bin like it meant nothing at all. He had no idea what was hidden inside it. And that was exactly the point. My name doesn't matter much in this story. What matters is that I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a school librarian in a small town in Ohio, and I have spent the last 4 years watching my own son slowly try to erase me from my own life. I want to tell you how I let him think he was winning, and I want to tell you how, on a gray Tuesday morning in March, an attorney named Gerald Holt looked at the contents of a USB drive I had pulled from a garbage bin, set down his reading glasses, and said, "Don't leave this office. I'm calling the county prosecutor right now." But to understand that moment, you have to go back a little further. You have to understand who my husband was. My husband and I had been married for 38 years when he passed. He was a quiet man, a high school shop teacher who fixed things with his hands and never raised his voice, not once, not even when our son was a teenager running wild and testing every limit we had. My husband believed in patience. He believed that if you built something carefully enough, it would last. He had calloused hands and a soft heart, and for 38 years I was grateful every single morning that I had married him. He died of a stroke 18 months ago. It happened fast, the way those things sometimes do. One evening, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee, and by the following Thursday, he was gone. I held his hand at the hospital until the machine stopped, and then I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours because I couldn't remember how to start the car. My son drove down from Columbus the day after the funeral. He brought his wife, and they stayed for a week. And during that week, he was kind to me in a way that, looking back now, I should have recognized as performance. He helped me sort through paperwork. He offered to take over managing the bills since I was overwhelmed. He said I didn't need to worry about any of it. He said he would handle everything. I was grieving. I was exhausted. I said thank you. That was my first mistake. Though if I am being honest with myself, the real mistake had started much earlier than that. And it had started not with me, but with my husband. About 8 months before his stroke, my husband had begun to notice things, small things at first. A household account that seemed lower than it should be, a CD we had opened years ago that had apparently been cashed out, though neither of us had touched it. He mentioned it to me once, quietly, over dinner, and I had brushed it off. I told him he was probably misremembering. I told him I would look into it later. I didn't look into it later. I forgot. But my husband didn't forget. He was a shop teacher who fixed things. When he noticed something broken, he didn't walk away. He got down on his knees and looked closer. He started keeping a notebook. A small, brown, spiral-bound notebook that he tucked inside the false bottom of his mahogany keepsake box, the box that sat on the top shelf of our bedroom closet, the one that held old watch parts and a broken compass, and what our son had always dismissively called Dad's useless junk. My husband put the notebook there because he knew our son never found anything in that box worth touching. He also put something else inside it. A small black USB drive, barely the size of a thumb, tucked beneath a broken watch strap. On that drive, he had saved 4 months' worth of documentation. Bank statements, scanned receipts, screenshots of wire transfers and account changes that had been made using power of attorney paperwork our son had apparently drawn up 2 years earlier, paperwork my husband had signed during a medical scare, thinking it was only for emergencies, not understanding the full scope of what he had agreed to. My husband was not a financial man. He was a shop teacher, but he was methodical and he was thorough, and by the time his stroke took him, he had built something careful and complete and devastating, something he never had the chance to tell me about because there was no warning before he was gone. For 1.5 years, that box sat on the shelf in the closet. I walked past it every day. I never opened it. My son's name is Derek. His wife's name I will not use. I will only say that she has long red fingernails and a habit of walking through other people's homes like she is calculating the resale value of every room. They began helping me in earnest about 2 months after the funeral. Derek added his name to my checking account so he could monitor my spending and make sure I wasn't being taken advantage of. He suggested gently, always gently, that the house might be too much for me to maintain alone. He started talking about a condo, a smaller place, something easier to manage. I didn't argue. I was still learning how to sleep in the bed without my husband in it. By month 4, 2 of my savings accounts had been consolidated into a joint account Derek controlled. By month 6, the investment account my husband and I had maintained for retirement had been simplified, and when I asked Derek to explain the new statements, he smiled and told me not to worry, that he was getting much better returns on my behalf. By month 8, I had signed 3 documents his wife slid across my kitchen table with sticky note tabs, marking the signature lines, and I had not read them carefully enough. I know how that sounds. I know what some of you are thinking right now. I thought the same thing later. Alone in this house, asking myself how a woman who ran a library for 3 decades, who taught children how to read critically, how to ask questions, how to never accept a summary when you could read the source, how that woman sat at her own kitchen table and signed papers she hadn't read. Grief does something to the mind. It doesn't make you stupid. It makes you tired in a way that goes all the way down to the bone. And when you are that tired, and someone you love is standing in front of you, telling you he has everything handled, sometimes you put down the pen before you've finished reading. The day everything changed was a Saturday in October. Derek and his wife had come to help me declutter before a plumber was coming to do some work. They were cheerful and efficient in the way that made me feel like a project being managed. His wife had brought boxes. Derek had a trash bag. They moved through the house with a confidence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, though I couldn't have said exactly why. At some point, Derek went into the bedroom closet. I heard him moving things around on the high shelf. When he came out, he had my husband's mahogany box in his hands, and he was already moving toward the garage. That old thing? Mom, this has just been sitting up there forever. Dad's broken watch parts and whatever else. I'll toss it. Something moved in my chest. Not grief, exactly. Something sharper. Leave it, I said. Derek looked at me with that patient, careful look he had been using for 18 months. Mom, it's just clutter. I said, leave it, Derek. He set it on the bed with a small shrug, the kind that means, fine, but you're being irrational. They finished helping and left by mid-afternoon. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and held the box in my lap for a long time. I don't know what made me open it. Something my husband had said once, years ago, came back to me, he had said. When something feels wrong, get closer. Don't walk away. I opened the box. The watch parts were there. The broken compass, the old cufflinks from his father, and tucked beneath a worn leather watch strap, the small brown notebook and a USB drive no larger than my thumb. I opened the notebook first. My husband's handwriting small, precise. The handwriting of a man who had spent decades writing measurements on wood-filled page after page. Dates, account numbers, amounts, names of financial institutions. Notes in the margins. Derek signed, did not ask us. And wire transfer $14,200, no explanation given. And further on, underlined twice. Check the drive. Everything is on the drive. I sat on that bed for a very long time. I am not a woman who cries easily. I learned a long time ago to hold myself together until I had a plan. But sitting there with my husband's handwriting in my hands, reading the careful, methodical record he had built while he was also learning that he was running out of time, I put the notebook down and I let myself cry. Not for long, just long enough. Then I wiped my face, put the notebook and the drive back in the box, and carried it to the kitchen table. Here is what I want you to understand about the next 2 weeks. I did not call Derek. I did not mention what I had found. I went to the public library 2 towns over, not my old library, where people knew me, and I sat at a computer terminal and I read every piece of documentation on that USB drive. Bank statements going back 4 years, wire transfers, a scanned copy of a power of attorney document that had been altered after my husband signed it, extending Derek's authority well beyond what either of us had agreed to. A series of emails between Derek and his wife discussing the estate timeline while my husband was still alive. There was also a voice memo. My husband had recorded himself at the kitchen table one evening, reading aloud from a bank statement, narrating what he was looking at, saying the date and time clearly at the start. His voice on that recording was the voice I had known for 38 years. Calm, careful, building something that would last. I pressed my hand flat against the library table and held myself very still until I could breathe normally. I did not call a big firm. I called Gerald Holt, who had handled my husband's will, who had known us for 15 years, who had once fixed a lawnmower with my husband in a church parking lot. I made an appointment for a Tuesday morning. I told the receptionist it was about estate matters. I brought the USB drive and the notebook in my purse, in a Ziploc bag, the way my husband had left them. Gerald Holt has a small office above a dry cleaner on Main Street. He has been practicing law in this county for 32 years. He is not a man who startles easily. I watched his face while he read. He started with the notebook, moving slowly, turning pages. Then he plugged the drive into his laptop. He read for a long time, without saying anything. At one point, he stopped and looked at me over his reading glasses, and I could see him recalibrating something. He got to the power of attorney alteration. He set his glasses down on the desk. "How long have you had this?" 2 weeks, I said. "I wanted to read everything before I came to you." He nodded slowly. He turned the laptop slightly and pointed to a specific document. "Do you understand what this is?" I told him I did. He picked up his phone. He said, "I need you to stay right here. I'm going to make 2 calls. He paused, and then he looked at me very steadily and said, "The second call is to the county prosecutor's office. Is that all right with you?" I said yes. While he made his calls, I sat in the chair across from his desk and looked out the window at the street below. A woman was walking, a small dog. A man in a red jacket was carrying a paper bag from the sandwich place down the block. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. I thought about my husband at his kitchen table with a voice recorder, reading a bank statement out loud, building something careful and complete. I thought about how he had believed that if you built something right, it would last. He was right. It lasted. What came next took several months. I will not pretend otherwise. Legal processes are not fast, and there were days that were very hard. Derek called me 3 times in the first week after Gerald filed. The first call was confused. The second was angry. The third was a voicemail that I saved and gave to Gerald without listening to more than the first sentence. His wife called once. I didn't answer. The investigation uncovered what my husband had suspected, and more. The total amount redirected from our accounts over 4 years came to just over $91,000. Some of it had gone to renovations on Derek's house in Columbus. Some of it had gone to a joint investment account held in Derek and his wife's names only. The power of attorney alteration had been done by a notary who lost her license as part of the proceedings. On the morning of the hearing, I wore the blue blazer I had worn to every significant moment of my adult life. My first day as head librarian, my daughter-in-law's shower back, when I still thought she might be someone I'd learned to love, my husband's retirement party. I sat in that courtroom and I listened to Gerald lay out every document, every transfer, every date and amount and signature, all of it built from the contents of a USB drive that had nearly ended up in a garbage bag on a Saturday in October. The judge was a woman about 10 years younger than me. She read the materials carefully. She asked several precise questions. When it was over, she looked at Derek for a long moment before she spoke. I did not feel triumph in that room. I want to be clear about that, because I know that is what some people expect from a story like this. I felt something quieter than triumph. I felt like something that had been crooked for a very long time had been made straight again. Derek will face sentencing in the spring. The money will be largely recovered through asset seizure. Gerald tells me it may take time, but it will come. The night after the hearing, I came home to this house that I had almost been maneuvered out of, and I made a pot of tea, and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my husband had once sat with a voice recorder, reading to himself in the dark, and I opened his notebook one more time. At the very back, on the last written page, there was something I had not noticed before. It was not a list of account numbers or a record of dates. It was just a few lines in his small, careful handwriting. If you're reading this and I'm not there, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was still trying to be certain. You know how I am. I didn't want to bring you something broken. I wanted to bring you something fixed. Everything you need is on the drive. You know what to do. You always have. I sat with that for a long time. My husband was a shop teacher who fixed things. He built something in a mahogany box on a high shelf, and he built it carefully enough that it held together for 18 months after he was gone. Long enough for me to find it, long enough for it to matter. I am 63 years old and I live alone in this house in Ohio, and some days are still very hard. But I sleep well now, and every morning when I walk past that closet, I think about what it means to build something that lasts. I want to ask you something before we go. Have you ever stayed quiet about something in your family because you didn't want to cause trouble and later wished you had spoken sooner? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. And if you're watching from somewhere far away tonight, I'm glad you're here. I really am. Where are you watching from? And do you believe that the people closest to us are always the ones we should trust most with what we've built?